This is the most important election of 2023, and you've probably never heard of it.
The Wisconsin State Supreme Court race will have sweeping consequences.
An incredible amount of money and campaigning coming in the next couple weeks.
Both parties eye the race as a way to fundamentally transform Wisconsin politics for potentially years to come.
It's hard to overstate the stakes of this race, not just for Wisconsin, but for all of us. Here's why. The majority on the Wisconsin Supreme Court is up for grabs. Depending on how it swings, the court could decide whether Trump succeeds in stealing the 2024 election. It could undo an 1849 law and restore the rights to an abortion. It could protect the rights of workers, roll back the worst gerrymander in the country, and even revive Wisconsin democracy after years of right-wing attacks. There is a lot on the line, and that means there's also a lot of dark money pouring into this race.
What's expected to be the most expensive Supreme Court race in state history.
But here's the thing, elections like this are technically supposed to be nonpartisan. That's why you'll often hear candidates talking like this.
Politics is poison to the work of the court. Every dissent, every concurrence has been based 100% on what the law is, not on what I think it ought to be.
For working class voters who don't have time to sit down and dissect the candidate's judicial philosophy from hours of candidate forums, this can make it really hard to know how to vote. But for candidates who have a lot to hide, never having to talk about your personal politics is actually extremely convenient. Luckily for us, we have Google. For this video, I worked with the team at More Perfect Union, a nonprofit newsroom, to do a deep dive into the candidates who are competing for control of Wisconsin's highest court. We dug through financial disclosures, court cases, candidate forums, and late 2000s blog posts. These documents paint a picture of two candidates with wholly different visions for the future of Wisconsin and America. And there is a lot riding on which one of them wins. Let's start with the conservative candidate, Dan Kelly. One thing he wants everyone to know is that his personal politics are completely irrelevant to how he'll rule as a judge.
I will apply the law without regard to my personal preferences or my personal values or my personal politics.
That all sounds really great, in theory, but the reality of Dan Kelly's actual record as a living, breathing human being makes it clear that he is the furthest thing from nonpartisan. In a blog post he wrote in 2012, Dan Kelly said that pro-choice advocates are, quote, knowingly favoring a policy that has its primary purpose harming children. Not exactly a politically neutral stance on abortion. He called Obama's 2012 re-election a win for socialism, same-sex marriage, recreational marijuana, and tax hikes. But these extreme right-wing opinions became a liability for Kelly when he was nominated by Governor Scott Walker to the state Supreme Court in 2016. So he deleted them.
I think it's inappropriate for a justice to comment publicly on their political beliefs or political philosophy.
Now, if he doesn't want us to read what he's written, maybe we can look at how he ruled in his brief stint on the state Supreme Court. In one decision, he required the city of Madison to let people carry hidden weapons on city buses. In another, he refused to require a pipeline company to protect citizens from polluted water. And in 2019, he ruled in favor of a right-wing law firm whose board members had just donated, days earlier, to his 2020 re-election campaign. Naturally, Kelly, who is only guided by the spirit of the law itself, opposed any rules that would require him to recuse himself from cases with such a clear conflict of interest. Now, as far as Kelly is concerned, the money he receives certainly doesn't impact the way he rules. But just for fun, let's look into it anyway.
Go vote for Justice Daniel Kelly. Daniel Kelly!
In his 2020 re-election campaign, Kelly benefited from a last-minute dump of $1.4 million that flooded the Wisconsin airwaves a week before Election Day. One of the main groups behind the funding for those ads, the Judicial Crisis Network, which is run by a man named Leonard Leo. You might not know his name, but you're definitely familiar with his work.
Deciding who to pick for the United States Supreme Court. And Leonard, you were fantastic, all of your work.
That's right, Leo, the former vice president of the Federalist Society, was the key force behind Trump's nomination of Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett. He also runs a vast web of dark money that has successfully captured state Supreme Courts across the country. Dan Kelly, as the former president of the Milwaukee chapter of the Federalist Society, was a model recipient for Leo's money. But even with that last-minute cash infusion, he still ended up losing the election. But now he's running again. And this time, he's sponsored by the U-Lines, a pair of right-wing billionaires who are laser-focused on transforming their home state of Wisconsin. For over a decade, their spending has been absolutely vital to the right-wing dismantling of unions and democracy in that state. They each donated $20,000 to Kelly, and their PAC, Fair Courts America, has pledged to spend millions in support of his campaign.
Dan Kelly for Wisconsin Supreme Court. Fair Courts America paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Then there's the Bradley Foundation, which presents itself as a modest family foundation based in Milwaukee. But with an endowment of almost $1 billion, they are at the center of a network of dark money that's been bankrolling Trump's big lie. No wonder they're interested in Kelly, who recently returned from an election integrity tour with former Justice Mike Gableman, who himself had just finished a 14-month investigation into the stolen election that yielded nothing of substance. Kelly has been rewarded with donations from the president of the Bradley Foundation and the vice chairman of its board, and more money is almost definitely on the way. So no, Kelly isn't above politics. He never was. But he's not really that unique either. Dozens of states have their own Dan Kellys, judges who share the same extremist ideology, who've been handpicked and trained by an extremely well-funded right-wing machine with roots that extend back for decades. What has changed in recent years is just how much money goes into these races. Ever since Citizens United opened the door for unlimited outside spending, state judicial races have been flooded with hundreds of millions of dollars from far-right groups. That all culminated with this race in Wisconsin as probably the most expensive state Supreme Court race in U.S. history. And most of that money will be flowing in from outside the state. But the people of Wisconsin haven't lost their democracy yet.
This race is really about our fight for democracy.
That's Janet Protasewicz. She's running against Kelly. She was a circuit court judge for almost a decade, and before that, served as assistant district attorney for more than 25 years. And unlike Kelly, she is extremely open about her values and is speaking directly to working class families. We caught up with her at a Teamsters Union Hall, where she was meeting with union members to discuss the issues most important to their lives.
Act 10 affected the union that I belong to, the Association of State Prosecutors, when I was in the district attorney's office. And I went to Madison and I marched in solidarity.
Act 10, introduced by Republican Governor Scott Walker in 2011, effectively ended collective bargaining for most public workers in Wisconsin, resulting in the single largest decline in union density of any state in the country.
Hundreds of thousands of union members, in particular teachers, took over the state capitol for months in protest.
The law was upheld by the conservative majority on the state Supreme Court in 2014. That wasn't the court's only attack on democracy.
There was a Supreme Court case last year that was decided 4-3. Which has allowed our totally rigged maps to stay in place.
Wisconsin voters have supported Democrats in 14 of the last 17 statewide elections. But because of these gerrymandered maps, the GOP still manages to hold near supermajorities in both legislative chambers. And the lawyer who defended those maps the first time they were drawn in 2011? Yup, Dan Kelly. This election is our only shot for years to write fair congressional maps in one of the most gerrymandered states in the entire country, a state that is often the tipping point for control of the U.S. House.
I also think it's highly likely that the results of the 2024 presidential election will come to the Wisconsin Supreme Court chamber.
More than any other upcoming election, this race will decide whether Trump can successfully steal the election in 2024. Just look at how close he came to doing it in Wisconsin in 2020. The state Supreme Court narrowly sided with empirical reality in a 4-3 ruling. And it's not a huge mystery how Kelly might rule if he were presented with a similar case. That's bad news for all of us, because Wisconsin is projected to be the most likely tipping point state in 2024. And then there's abortion. Wisconsin has an archaic abortion ban from 1849, but a case to overturn the law could come before the court later this year.
Now, obviously, in a judicial race, I can't tell you where I'm going to come down on any issue. But what I can talk to you about are my values. And my values are, and always have been, that a woman has a right to choose.
Trust in our courts is the lowest it's ever been. And it's not because of progressives like Protasewicz talking too much about their values. It's because of radicals like Kelly who make wildly unpopular decisions like this.
It's a sad day for Americans. And hopefully we'll turn that around in the state of Wisconsin with a Supreme Court that people can actually rely on and that they trust.
The irony is that candidates like Janet Protasewicz are treated by the mainstream media as more partisan than candidates like Kelly, because she's willing to tell voters out loud about who she is and who she's there to represent. Dan Kelly, on the other hand, prefers to hide his radical politics behind vague platitudes like upholding the law. But occasionally, he does say the quiet part out loud.
Squeezing out public personal preferences and making sure that the result of the case is something that's commanded by the law.
That Freudian slip is actually a pretty good summary of Kelly's actual politics. Squeezing out the public and ruling in the interests of right-wing elites is exactly what you can expect Dan Kelly to do on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. That would be a disaster for working-class people in Wisconsin and across the country. We can't afford to look away. This has been a collaboration with More Perfect Union. They do incredible work, tirelessly advocating for the working class, but you can help make sure their videos get seen. So please click the link right here on the screen and subscribe to More Perfect Union to see more videos just like this one.